Hi, I'm Melanie Bunn. I am a registered nurse and I work with Dementia Alliance of North Carolina. And I am thrilled to be here with you talking about something that I get tons of phone calls about. I get phone calls about he won't, or he says no, or she won't, she says no. And it's important that we think about that not as being the responsibility of that person living with dementia, but we begin to think about the idea of getting to, say it with me, yes. Say it really loud, yes. The idea of getting to yes as being our responsibility, not the responsibility of the person who's living in brain change. So let's get started talking about how do we, as people who care for and with and about people living with dementia, how we get to yes. So let's get started. Let's start by talking about when do they say no? Because there's some real patterns to when people living with dementia say no. They say no when they don't understand what it is that you're doing. Now, I understand what I'm doing. I understand that what I'm doing is trying to give my person something to drink. I understand that that's what I'm doing. But my person living with dementia may not understand that that's what I'm doing. I may get a no when the person doesn't like what it is that I'm doing. So maybe I think I've always given my mom a hug when I come in to see her, but maybe today she's just not feeling it. She doesn't like it. So when I go to hug her, instead of being affectionate and loving, it's a little bit scary or startling. Maybe they say no when they don't like how we're doing it. So one of the things I get my nursing students to do is to practice brushing someone else's teeth. And if you've never practiced brushing someone else's teeth, or even better, have someone brush your teeth, you can figure out really quickly when you don't like what the person is doing, how they're doing. Sometimes people say no when there's something in the environment that doesn't feel comfortable. So maybe people say no when I'm in a room and I'm taking my clothes off and I hear voices right outside the door. Maybe that makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't know if someone's going to come in or not. And so I say no. Maybe the person says no when they don't really agree that it needs to be done. Because if I have years of getting up every morning, taking my shower, and then eating my breakfast, if I've eaten my breakfast, I think I've already taken my shower. So I don't agree that I need to have a shower. Maybe they say no when they don't like the way the situation feels, or it feels rushed, or it feels unsafe, or maybe, and sometimes, and this is hard to say, maybe sometimes people say no because they don't like you, or they don't like the person who's helping because maybe you sound bossy, or maybe you sound or look too scary. So they might say no. But it's not because they don't want to do whatever it is that you want them to do. It's not because they're being stubborn, And this is really hard sometimes because if I were in a room with you and if I were to say, how many of you have ever been called stubborn to your face or behind your back? How many of you have ever been called stubborn? Many of you would raise your hands and say, yes, I'm stubborn. It's different when we're thinking about the person being stubborn because it's who they are, being stubborn because they really don't get it. And when people have dementia, they're not making that choice. Maybe it's because, or it's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're just hard to get along with. They're not doing it. They're saying no for some other reason. And the other reason they're saying no is because they don't have the ability, they're not in a situation to say yes. So to get to yes, the change that we make is in us. So point your fingers at yourself. Say, I need to change. I need to change. I need to change because I'm the person who can change, the person who has the ability to change, not the person living with dementia who is living in brain change. So we change us to get to yes by changing our focus from what's lost to what's left. Now say that with me. I know I can't see you. I know I can't hear you, but there's something about just saying the words out loud that makes a difference. So say it with me. Changing from what's lost to what's left. So let's look at a picture of what I'm talking about. So if you look at these two brains, these are autopsy photographs. These are people who generously donated their brains to help us understand what happens with dementia, to help us understand what's happening in the brain of someone who is living with dementia. So if you look at those two photographs, and they're not drawings or computer-generated images, they really are photographs. If you look at those two photographs, the photograph on the left is the brain of someone who died from an accident. This is someone who was living life. Things were going along fine, doing everything they needed to do, and boom, there's a big accident, and that person dies. The brain on the right is the brain of somebody who died after living with dementia to the end of the disease. So if you look at those two brains, the first thing that comes to my mind is the differences. So I'm going to give you just a moment to look at those two brains and to think about what do you notice is different about those two brains. Now, I'm betting most of y'all notice that those two brains are different sizes. The one on the left is larger than the one on the right. I bet most of y'all noticed that there's a difference in the color. The brain on the left is much lighter in color than the brain on the right. Now, that's because as the brain cells die, they leave behind inflammation and irritation and distress and leftover parts of cells. And so that brain on the right is very irritated. You might even say that it's inflamed. So that brain on the left is irritated and inflamed and distressed, and that's why it's darker. The third difference that most people notice is that those crevices are much deeper. Those crevices in the brain of the person living with dementia are much deeper, and that's because as those brain cells die, they collapse. And as they collapse, they take up less space. And the space is filled up with fluid. And so the brain actually looks shriveled up and it looks dried up, but it actually is because there's less tissue and more fluid. So 3 changes. Ultimately, what comes down to is the brain on the left will be at 100% when the person dies from an accident. The brain on the right has lost about 2/3 of their tissue. So it's about 2/3 of the size of the brain on the left. Now, it gets a little confusing because it doesn't look like it if you just look at these two pictures. But what actually happens is there are changes happening inside the brain as well as outside. So that's what's lost. So let's begin to spend some time not talking just about, we just mentioned it, not talking just about what's lost, but let's spend some time talking about what's preserved or what's protected or what's left. So if you look at those two brains, and I'm also give you a couple of seconds to look at those two brains and not look at what's different, but I want you to look at them and think about what is similar, what's the same between those two brains. And I bet you find some parallels, that even though the brain is smaller, it's still the same shape. It's not like part of the brain was amputated or cut off. All of the parts are still there. They're just smaller. All of the pieces are still there. They're just smaller. So when we start thinking about how are we going to get to yes, we begin thinking about how can we take advantage of, how can we use the brain that's left to help people living with dementia be successful, and so we can support them. So let's begin to think about what's left in 4 specific areas and how that connects with getting to yes. So let's start by thinking about memory. Now, memory, we hear a lot about memory with dementia. We hear a lot about the common kinds of changes, and the common kind of changes are things like people have trouble getting new information in. They remember the old stuff, but they can't get in the new information. They can't get in that new information. So they remember the way things used to be, but they can't get the new stuff in. So we can use that to get to yes. We can use remembering how things used to be and then recreating them or matching them to make it get to yes. It might include making changes in the environment around us. It might include making changes to how we approach people and get things started. It might include making changes to things like the timing of day, the timing of order, the timing of how fast we're moving. So let me give you an example of using memory to get to yes. So let's think about a situation where the challenge was getting somebody to go out of the house. The person, you say, do you want to go to the grocery store? No. Do you want to go to the park? No. Do you want to go walk? No. The answer to do you want to go was always no. And let's think about a lady who was always very well groomed. So someone like Nicole, who always looks pulled together and well done. This lady was very similar. She always had her makeup on, her hair was always done, her clothes were always done, so much to the point that the last thing she would do before she would leave the house is go to the mirror. She had a lipstick in the drawer right underneath the mirror, so she would go to the mirror and take her lipstick out. And right before she left the house, she would fix her lipstick, and then she would be ready to go into her day. So, what this family tried, you're figuring it out, you know what I'm going to say, is when it was time to go, no matter where it was, they would bring Mom a mirror, and they would bring Mom a lipstick, and Mom would take the lipstick and would look in the mirror and would make the adjustments, and then off they would go. Beautiful. How exciting. It's wonderful. Now, that probably wouldn't work if they tried to use one of these. Now, what's the difference between this and this? They're both lipsticks, but this is kind of a clear lipstick, and it's kind of on a different kind of tube with a sponge. This is a lipstick that looks like a lipstick. It's a color that used to be, that's familiar to Mom, and it's a square kind of black case that was the kind of lipstick that Mom always used to use. So this means lipstick to Mom. This means nothing to Mom. So that's an example of using memory to get to yes, using things that are familiar. Because when we think about people don't remember new stuff, and they do remember the way things used to be, then we can put those together and use the way things used to be to get people to do things now by making changes in the environment, by making changes in our approach, by making changes in the timing of what we're trying to do. We may talk about this more later. So let's move on to another idea of using communication to get to yes. Now, people living with dementia, one of the things we know, and one of the things that creates a lot of challenge and a lot of difficulty is communication, because communication is a two-way street. So I'm giving you information, and I'm getting information from the people around me. I'm getting information from the people around me, and that makes our communication a two-way street. So in healthcare, we call this receptive language or understanding, and expressive language or my ability to tell you what I want. It's so much more than just the words. And one of the biggest challenges is changing your understanding of communication, meaning words, to changing your understanding that communication is everything. Communication is your movements. If I do like this and give you this gesture, it means come on. If I do like this, it means I want to hug you. If I look happy, it means I'm glad to see you. If I look sad, it means I understand that things aren't good for you right now, and I share that you're sad or that you're distressed. So when we use communication to get to yes, it's realizing that words are important, but there's a lot more to communication than yes. So for example, if it's time for a snack, it's time for a snack. And I go up to my person and I say, Dad, would you rather have a granola bar or peanut butter crackers? What Dad might hear is, Dad, or you want peanut butter? And for translation, that's going to be really hard. But it's just kind of and so what I'm saying is, do you want a granola bar or do you want peanut butter crackers? But what the person living with dementia might hear is wah, 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 wah. Now, I can make that better by doing what you just saw me do. Because if I say to Dad, Dad, granola bar or peanut butter crackers? Dad has a better chance of understanding. And Dad might say, give me that granola bar. He might not say those words. But if Dad goes to reach for the granola bar, what do I now know? He wants the granola bar. If he reaches for the peanut butter crackers, what do I know? He wants the peanut butter crackers. If he reaches for both of them, what do I know? I better get some milk as well. But these movements and gestures, giving these visual cues, will help us get to yes, will help us get to we know what you're asking. Now, here's a real issue. One challenge is some of us ask questions, and we ask questions in a yes-no way. So I might say, Dad, do you want something to eat? And the automatic answer when I don't understand is no. So if I avoid asking a question that's a yes or no question, and instead I ask a question that is choice, and I ask a question when I don't have a preference. I don't have a preference if Dad takes the peanut butter crackers or the granola bar. Either is fine with me. If I ask a yes-no question, then often I have a preference. I want Dad to say, yes, I'm hungry, or yes, I want both of them. But I take that choice away from him a little bit. So let's move on past communication to the third one, which is the idea of motor skills. So you'll see on the slide the idea of nexting. And nexting is a new approach. And it's the idea that we can get people to do the things that we want to do by telling them what to do, by giving them the cue of what to do first. For example, the example I use, if I get in my car, when I get in my car, I shut the door. The next thing I do, put on my seatbelt. So I get in my car, I put on the seatbelt. So we get into these automatic responses to help people to understand what we want them to do. The idea is that if I set up the right situation, if I put people in the right situation, then my chance of getting the right response is going to go up dramatically. So, for example, if I've got a picture up there of a tub, if I know that my person's routine, their nexting kind of thing, is to shave, so we do the shaving, the next thing is to get in the tub. That kind of connects it, makes it the automatic kind of thing, and we're much more likely to be successful in getting to next. If I hand somebody a washcloth, and I give them the visual cue of this, and I hand them the washcloth, the automatic kind of next thing to do is to wash their face. So when we're starting to think about getting new activities in place with COVID, we've all had to get used to new things. If we use that nexting, it can help us get to yes. So an example, hand sanitizer. I mean, don't you wish you owned the only right to hand sanitizer? I do. So if the pattern we want to do, the pattern we want to create is to have people use hand sanitizer when they get in the car from the store, then the pattern that I want to use is to make that hand sanitizer become so automatic that it doesn't become a conversation. So then the pattern becomes, we get in the car, we put the seatbelt on, we put the hand sanitizer on, we're ready to go. And that's how we use nexting to get to yes. One more. Sensory processing to get to yes. We want to think about what do people see and hear and touch. So we want people to eat more and better than giving them the smells of food, giving them food that they can see, maybe using a darker plate than the food is so they can see, using things that taste good will help us be more likely to get a yes than no, thank you, I don't think so. If it's appealing, if it's something that looks familiar, one of the challenges we have are these with water, with getting people to drink. Because y'all all know what you're supposed to do with this bottle. You know you do this. But if what you're used to is drinking out of a glass and a particular size of glass and cup of glass, if I pick up a coffee mug and there's no coffee, we've got a problem. So using what we see and what we hear and what we touch and what we smell and what we taste to help us to get to that wonderful yes. So to pull it all together, to kind of put it together, what makes a difference in yes and no? Well, the first thing is to really understand what that no means. Does that no mean I don't like it? Does it mean I don't understand it? Is it something about the environment? Really understand what does that no mean? Then match your response to fix what's not working from that perspective of that person living with dementia. Now, this isn't going to work as well if you're feeling stressed and you're feeling anxious. So do this with me. Bring your shoulders up like this. Bring your hands up like this. Pull your mouth to one side, squint one eye, and say, I'm just trying to help you. Because that's what you look like. Sometimes I look like it too. Instead, take a deep breath and let it out. And find a way to be flexible and creative by taking care of yourself. Find a way to take care of yourself, because the creativity and the flexibility can only come if you're in a state of being rested and relaxed and supported and knowledgeable and skilled. So think about how you can pull some of these situations, these options, some of this information, some of these strategies in to help you in your life get from no to yes. So I'm going to leave you with, I don't like to give advice, but a little bit of advice. What mostly makes a difference in yes and no is reaching out. Dementia can be very isolating. Dementia can make your world very small. It makes the world of the person living with dementia, it can make their world very small. What can make a difference between yes and no is reaching out. So if you don't understand, if you don't know what to do, if you don't know how to do it, reach out for education. There's some wonderful resources right here in this area, as well as throughout the country, and now with the internet throughout the world. If you're feeling overwhelmed, reach out for resources. Reach out for respite. Reach out for some time away. Reach out for support or resources from people within your community, within your neighborhood, within your healthcare life. And if you're struggling, it's hard and it's getting harder, reach out for support, because you can't do this by yourself. Love needs support, and so reach out for support. That might mean reaching out to someone within your faith community. It might be reaching out for someone within your healthcare community. It might be reaching out for support from an organization like Dementia Alliance of North Carolina. We're out there. Reach out. I enjoyed spending some time with you. Have a great rest of the conference.